Hello there, good evening, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 11, whether you're watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or elsewhere. Tonight, each of our guests is joining us from all over the world. We go from Dundee to Leicestershire to Aberystwyth to Yorkshire to Germany, and broadcasting live to you here tonight from Cheshire. In a few moments, we're going to meet each of our guests. But before then, it's our regular reminder. We want to hear your views, and we want you to send in questions or points to challenge each of our guests on what they say. You can do so using our brand new hashtag, if I say it correctly, our brand new hashtag SD11, which of course will change with each show. It'll be SD12 next week, and I'll do my best to put your questions to our guests and to let our viewers know what you're thinking. Our new hashtag, of course, gets over the issue with plural or not and gives you more space to rant at how much you think our guests are absolutely right or absolutely wrong. If you are watching on Google Plus, you can also use the Applause app, which tells us how much you agree or disagree with what's being said at any particular moment. Without any further ado, let's introduce each of our guests. Our first is Bradley Booth. Good evening, Bradley.
Evening, Gareth. I'm Bradley. I'm a politics student from Dundee and a member of the SNP.
Thank you very much. Our next, and Bradley is a returning guest, our next returning guest is Matthew Hulbert. Good evening, Matthew.
Hi there, Gareth. Yes, I'm Matthew. I'm a councillor for the Liberal Democrats in Leicestershire. Also involved with a number of different organisations, including Republic and Compass.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Our next guest is a new guest to us. It's Joe Pattinson. Good evening, Joe.
Evening. Good evening. I'm Joe. I'm a student at the University of Chester studying French and Germany, currently in Germany. On my year abroad, centre-right leaning.
Thank you, Joe, who is, as we say, coming from Germany. We are an international programme, if anything. Our next guest is another returnee. It's John Mousley. Good evening, John.
Good evening. I'm John Mousley. I'm a Master's History student at Aberystwyth University. I'm originally from Leicestershire, where I'm a UKIP activist.
Thank you, John, and it's a warm welcome to his first visit to Spectrum as well. It's Leon French. Good evening, Leon.
Hello, I'm Leon. I'm a third-year music student at the University of Hull and a Conservative activist in Yorkshire.
Thank you very much, Leon. And of course, I'm Gareth. I'm your host tonight. For full disclosure, I am a Conservative, but I'll do my best to play devil's advocate and to challenge all of our guests tonight. Our standard disclaimer, of course, is that whilst our guests may support a party, none of our guests speaks for or on behalf of that party. Please take everything they say tonight as being their own personal opinion. If you'd like to appear here, down here, next week, or in future, get in touch with us and reserve your place. We really do welcome as many of you as possible onto the show, whatever your political views. And a fortnight from now, on the 25th of January, we have our special show on England, what to do in England post the Scottish independence referendum. Now, our topics tonight that we'll be talking about are going to be on the election debates and the role of the Green Party within them. It's going to be on whether or not democracy is the best system of government that we have, and it's going to be on Angela Merkel and whether or not she's the Queen of Europe, and we've already had an opinion expressed to us on Spectrum about that one, which we retweeted a few minutes ago. Before that, though, a brief look at the week's news, and frankly, there is only one news story this week that's worth our looking at, and that is the sad events that have taken place in Paris, where, as I'm sure you all know, a number of terrorists took people hostage, went into the magazine headquarters of Charlie Hebdo and killed a number of people, killed police officers, and so on. We had a quite rousing and stirring march today, which included leaders from all over the world, marching in sympathy with 1.5 million people through the streets of Paris, and of course there were marches elsewhere in Europe as well, from London to Brussels and beyond. I wonder, Bradley, Matthew, if either of you would like to start us off and talk about this for a moment.
Go ahead.
It's happened again.
Have we lost Gareth already?
That's impressive. Shall we just talk about it?
Yeah. Bradley, Matthew?
Yeah, okay. So I'll start then. Sorry, I was waiting to see if Bradley was going to speak there. Well, I mean, in a sense, there's not a lot you can say, is there? I mean, it was dreadful. And whatever one thinks of some of what Charlie Hebdo published, you know, ultimately it's that old saying that we may not agree with you, but we'll fight to the death your right to do so. And you know, the answer, if you don't agree with what they publish, was to say so in debate, was to say so in the media, was to maybe get elected and say so. Of course, the answer was not to do what the terrorists did, and I think it's shocked everybody. And you know, I tweeted earlier on today that it was good to see the heads of government lining up in Paris today. Now, I know some people say, and quite rightly, that some of them may be a bit hypocritical because they're in France. We're in France defending democracy and free speech today, and in some of the countries that they represent, they don't necessarily allow those things fully at home, and I agree with that. But I hope that what they've seen today might just inspire some of them to go back to their countries, their respective countries, and you know, allow these things more freely where they're from. But you know, we just express our sympathy with the people of France at a truly devastating week.
Thank you, and my apologies for going missing there for a moment. Bradley.
Yeah, it's a tragic event, but I thought the response was fantastic. The people in marches in London, I think there was a march in Glasgow, march in Paris, and with the leaders as well, the world leaders in Paris today. Although I think some of what, I don't agree with everything they did publish, I agree with their right to publish it, and I hope that this is the only time this happens, or we can prevent anything that happens like this again.
Now, Bradley, just a quick question, if I may, because Police Scotland recently tweeted that they would be monitoring the internet for offensive comments, and anything like that would be investigated. I don't know if there's anything you would like to say about that in terms of you know, how that's been taken in Scotland and what that's to do with.
Yeah, well, I thought it was quite hypocritical of quite a few people who, a few weeks before, were calling for people to get arrested and what's her name, Katie Hopkins, to be looked into for tweets that she sent. And then as soon as this happens, they're claiming they're all for free speech.
Mm. Thank you. Right, anyone else like to come in at this point?
Yeah, can I have a go?
Yeah.
A couple of points. Firstly, I think one of the best things to come out of this, if you can call it anything good to come out of this, is 2 weeks ago I had no idea what this magazine was. But I think because of these attacks, more people than ever know who these people are, retweeting the cartoons that these terrorists found so offensive. And I think that's a very good response that we all can have to these attacks. Secondly, though, I'm quite annoyed that the Saudi Arabian ambassador turned up at the march in Paris today, a day after his country sentenced a blogger to 10 years in jail and 1,000 lashes for a similar crime that those terrorists attacked the cartoonists for.
Thank you. Leon.
I was absolutely disgusted. I mean, it's not often that these news stories really do get to me, but this one in particular did get to me quite a bit. The one thing that I'm worried about with this is that we see the public treating all Muslims as one homogenous block. They're all terrorists, you know, this idea. I have heard people saying it while I've been out and about. I was on the train from Doncaster to Hull the other day, and I heard people talk about it, and they said, well, you know, they're all the same, aren't they? And I thought, well, no, they're not all the same. The amount of Muslims who've come out and said, not in my name, they've said they've got on board with Je suis Charlie as well. I'm sure there was a march in, I think it was in Turkey or somewhere like that. Muslims coming out and saying, no, we don't believe in this, we don't agree with this. So that's what I am quite worried about, to be quite honest. And I know I've got a very good friend who lives in France, and I know he said to me that the attitude towards Muslims now is very, very low, and it's worrying. It's very worrying. We're not going to see the end of this for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, Joe. Sorry, go on. Your turn.
Yeah. I want to empathise with what others have said because the response has been magnificent. It's unacceptable actions of the rare people that don't represent Islam, and if Islam is represented that way, then goodness, that's it's an emotional topic really because especially in France because the rise of now is a very serious case because it's not just Muslims, it's the Jews and other minorities, which is just despicable, really, because the tension has increased, and when you stand united, like we have seen in France and all over the world, then it's a good sign that we want to stand united. If you get my drift.
Thank you very much indeed. I think one of the standout images today for me was the fact that you had Mahmoud Abbas from Fatah and the West Bank, a few people down from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and that was quite an important image today. It's also worth noting, of course, isn't it, that at the same time, Hamas, in their official newspaper, my understanding is, praised the attackers of the newspaper. This, of course, comes not long after action in the European Parliament to look at trying to recognise Hamas. Anyway, Matthew, you wanted, I don't know if you want to say anything on that, but you had another point you wanted to raise.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I thought I also noted on Twitter today that you had the Israeli leader and the Palestinian leader there, just a few people down from each other, and I think that was quite striking. That did say something quite profound to me, even if again they go back home and still on table to work things out. But I just wanted to make a point about Nigel Farage's comments this week, and I just think the man can't help himself. The man cannot help but try and make a political and, frankly, from my view, rather stupid point on every occasion, whatever happens. And for me, it spoke volumes about him and volumes about UKIP.
In what way?
In that he can't help himself but to try and make a party political point on every issue, and even on this, and a divisive point at that.
Okay, John.
On the message itself, what he spoke about, I can disagree with very little of what he said, to be honest. On the timing, I would have preferred if he waited till next week, to be honest. I think this week should have been more about reflection and tribute to those who had died. However, the points he was making, I think, are very important and need to be discussed.
A couple of issues that people have met. Sorry, go on. Who wanted to say that?
Oh, that was me.
Joe.
Something that struck a chord in me was the comments of Sajid Javid, who said that the Muslim community may want to look at how and who these attacks are caused by, and have to take responsibility. But of course, it's not in order to to make the name of Muslims and decry blasphemy. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. A few points from our audience so far. Ian, a former guest here at A Confused Ninja, says Leon is right, but I'll take hope from the public response after the siege in Sydney. He also adds that those defending free speech in France today were not defending the arrest because of a joke about the horrific incident in Glasgow. Councillor Charles Fifield, at Charles Fifield, freedom of expression in a nutshell, and there's an image there of Noam Chomsky. If we don't believe in freedom of expression for people we despise, we don't believe in it at all. And Adam Hawks, at the Adam Hawks, one person's view does not show the view of the mass as a whole. Yes, it's a difficult one. I mean, I found those images today very moving. I mean, it was quite profound to see so many people coming out, and how the Je suis Charlie hashtag has had such an impact. And I think it's good to see that we are perhaps going to be made to think a little bit more carefully and closely about those values that define us and define anyone who lives here. It should be about freedom of expression and pluralistic society where you can follow a religion of your choice so long as you're not trying to impose your view on somebody else. Final comments on this before we go. I'm going to go to you, Leon.
Yeah, a quick point on Je suis Charlie. It's been a fantastic, successful hashtag that's brought people out and in favour of free speech, fighting in favour of free speech. But I do wonder how many of those people are Charlie. I mean, I've seen some people on different, I'm going to put it out there, left-wing websites, Labelist, for example, was one, that they were honest enough to say, Je ne suis pas Charlie, I am not Charlie, because they disagreed with certain things that Charlie Hebdo put out there. But there are some people tweeting Je suis Charlie who has, as been mentioned before, only a few weeks ago signed a petition to get Katie Hopkins prosecuted for saying things that upset people. So the fact is, unfortunately, we're not all Charlie, we're not all in favour of free speech, and I just wish some people were a bit more honest about that fact.
Gareth, can I come in there?
Please do.
Thank you. I thought what Katie Hopkins said was deeply insensitive, and I sometimes wonder about, she appears to be, I think there's a difference, whereas the Charlie Hebdo writers, whether we agree with what they always put out there or not, were principled in their beliefs. Whereas I think with Katie Hopkins, she literally does say things because she needs to be controversial, because that is her shtick. That is what she gets paid for. That is what she why she writes a column for The Sun and occasionally gets to appear on This Morning or some other talk show, is because she says controversial things. Now, I don't think she should have been in any way investigated by the police for what she said, but I just wish that we'd kind of ignore her. Let her say what she wants, but do we have to keep putting her on TV and in our newspapers because, yet again, Katie Hopkins has said something controversial? I think it's a bit pathetic, to be honest.
Isn't that the point of freedom of speech, in that people have a right, under the right of freedom of expression, people have a right to express themselves, but no one is mandated to listen.
Right.
And people have an equal right to tell them why they think they're wrong. But this whole concept of, well, that's offensive, is utterly meaningless, isn't it? Unless someone is inciting violence or criminality, on what basis could the police get involved? Who wanted to say, can I?
Yeah, no. You said about people, basically freedom of expression doesn't protect you from freedom of response. I wanted to go back on the point. I'm afraid I am going to pick on UKIP again. There was a UKIP prospective parliamentary candidate. I've forgotten the guy's name, to be honest. The one who stood in...
John Bickley.
Sorry?
John Bickley.
That's the one. He put out a rather crass tweet, which I thought was disgusting, frankly, where it was basically hijacking the massacre as a rallying call for UKIP. And whenever anybody challenged him on it and said, I know I did, and said, I don't think that's appropriate, he said, oh, hang on, you're not protecting freedom of speech. Well, no, the fact is we are allowing freedom of speech. We're not trying to get him prosecuted, but we have our freedom to respond, and we're just telling him, I think that's absolutely disgraceful. I will, just for fairness, point out that the Road Trip 2015 campaign for the Conservatives did do the same thing, and I equally found that disgusting as well, which I hope all people would. But no, some people say they believe in freedom of speech, and what they interpret that to mean is, I'm free to say what I want, but you're not allowed to challenge me on it. Well, that's rubbish.
John, was that you?
That was me, yeah.
Go on.
I will agree with Leon in a way. There are people from across the political spectrum who interpret free speech to mean I will say what I want. However, on the John Bickley thing, again, I'm going to say I would have preferred if he had waited a while to make that tweet. But again, I'm a member of UKIP. I think our policies towards pretty much everything are better. I'm not going to apologise.
Yeah, the issue, because I spent a couple of days talking with John Bickley about that on Twitter, because he said basically, I can tell you word for word what he said, because naturally I saved it because I was really quite surprised that he would say something so thoroughly bizarre. The Paris atrocity shows that democracy and free speech are under attack. Entirely true. Entirely true.
Yeah.
Time to take a stand. Time for UKIP. Now, what that says is, look at this dreadful massacre. All these people who've been killed because of freedom of speech. Only UKIP can protect people from this. Now, that's crass and inaccurate and just bloody awful.
Do you expect
isn't
anything
it?
better from UKIP, Gareth?
Could I make
Well,
a...
I know some very nice people in UKIP, but that is, and then he goes on to quote George Orwell, who I think would have been disgusted that he
Yeah.
was quoting.
Would have defended his grave, yes.
Yeah.
But I do think, he starts off. I mean, it's those final 3 words that do it. Let's take a stand, in protecting democracy and free speech. No one's going to disagree with that. Time for UKIP. Well, why? Why?
Well, I can say that it's possibly that they're. I mean, I know a lot of UKIP members worry about immigration. Well, lowering immigration and supposedly taking control of our borders wouldn't help that. These terrorists are homegrown. The terrorists in France were born in France. I made a point on a Conservative MEP's page, actually, where he was basically saying the same thing that I am. And I said, we could close the border completely, and these terrorist attacks would not stop because these people are born in these countries where they attack. We have to solve the problem internally, not isolate ourselves from the world. I know that's not what UKIP are suggesting, but I know a lot of people support UKIP, and I know from speaking to people on the doorstep, a lot of people are voting UKIP because they're worried about immigration. That's the point, really. It just really confuses me, to be honest, because halting immigration or lowering it would not help this issue.
John, it's only fair that we come to you, but if you could explain why, it's at all relevant to say, and it's not really an implication. It's more saying only UKIP can resolve this problem. Could you please now reveal to the world how UKIP are the only people who could resolve this problem?
Okay, fair enough. First of all, I'll just go with saying I think tweeting that on the day was a mistake. However, on this point of it's time for UKIP, it's time for a change, if we are saying over the past 10 or 20 years our policies towards extremism have been working, I think we're lying to ourselves. I think, to be honest, extremism of several different forms has increased over the past 20 years. And I think the point John Bickley was making was there are better ways to go in tackling this problem, and UKIP is one of them, or if not the best one.
He didn't say that, though, did he? He said time for UKIP. He didn't say this is how we would resolve it. This is what could be done differently.
So
it was
I suppose
time
my response
for
to you,
UKIP.
I suppose my response to you is he's meant to lay out his policy for tackling extremism.
Yeah, well, can we have any idea? Because as far as I'm aware, we've not had anything. And it's quite obvious that because terrorism is still going on, terrorism hasn't been defeated. We didn't manage to defeat Irish terrorism for many, many years, and yet many of the people talking about this now didn't go on about how evil all Catholics were and how all Catholics must denounce terrorism and so on. If anyone from UKIP out there could tweet us and tell us a UKIP policy that is distinct, that would resolve this kind of issue, that might in any way justify someone on the day of such an atrocity saying time for UKIP, be very grateful, because it would add to the debate, which is something their parliamentary candidate singularly refused to do.
You seem to be linking the time thing to it. I've already said, I think, speaking about it on the day, perhaps even the week was a mistake. However,
No, I'm very specifically asking for policy. That's the thing. Very specifically, would like a policy.
So, John, there was quite a lot of mistakes, wasn't there, this week by UKIP? Quite a lot of them.
Well, let's not turn this into too much of a
argument
UKIP
over which of us made the more mistakes this week. I mean, Lib Dem voice going, there was no justification for the Charlie Hebdo attacks.
Oh.
However,
yeah,
they made a disgusting comment on it. They made a completely disgusting comment. Completely. This isn't party political or anything like that. I think we should get away from the party political aspect of it. I suppose, in defence of John Bickley, though I do think his comment was disgusting, I suppose 140 characters, it's not much to explain yourself and
Well,
not.
then don't tweet it.
Well, I agree with you. That's why I would reference David Cameron's quote on Twitter, which I won't quote word for word because inappropriate language. Too many tweets makes you know what tweet.
Yes.
Say.
Yeah,
So
the
just
issue
just
was
don't-
Leon. The issue it was Leon. He had 48 hours during which he and I were back and forth, and not on one occasion did he say, "Here is a policy that would
Well,
resolve this."
I was watching it.
As you know.
Yes, exactly. I saw what you said. So I defend him in the first tweet. After that, not at all, because he could have laid it out. But as I say, this isn't party political. There's from all spectrums of
But
politics.
they tried to make
Hang
it.
on.
Okay,
I know-
hold
I
on,
know-
Matthew.
I
I'm going
know.
to get to Joe next.
I know, Matthew, that UKIP have tried to make it party political.
Right,
But-
exactly.
But the Lib Dems have made, well, some Lib Dems have made some awful comments. Some people in Labour have made awful comments. Conservative Road Trip 2015 have tried to be party political about it. You know, I'm reading some of the comments on Twitter now, and they're actually, it does feel like we're being a little bit unfair on UKIP because it's not just UKIP.
Joe.
I don't know. Of course, these tweets, you need to think about them. Of course, you know, it's like Leon has said, it's meant to Twitter really, but yeah, well, they are ill-conceived, and therefore it asks you to question these people who make these tweets, whether it's Road Trip or John Bickley. But you know, like Gareth has said, it's all about the policy. Any red policy that makes a difference, that may stand out, but there was no answer. I saw, and but the underlying question is that is usually internal integration problems, because there is a question whether it has failed. But if you look at France or the UK, they have experienced much major attacks in comparison to Germany, where the only major one is a minor one, where 2 people were shot in Frankfurt Airport. So, and especially where Germany has probably the highest immigrant population in Europe. But on the whole, has that failed? And therefore, we have these attacks with people wanting to impose their views.
Lovely.
That is
Thank
the
you very
question.
much. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments at home. We're going to move on to our first full topic now. This will be introduced by John, and this is to do with the election debates and the Green Party. John.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. My question really is in 2 parts. The first one is, unlike lots of people on the internet, I'm largely in favour of the Greens taking part in the election debates. They've become a very sizable national party. They have an MP elected, they have hundreds of councillors, and I think it's only fair that they deserve a seat on the table during the election debates. However, as we've seen recently, David Cameron has pulled out of the election debates, and I was wondering, in relation to this, do we actually need one? I mean, we don't have a presidential election system in the UK. We have a parliamentary election system. We elect our governments via local MPs on a variety of issues, and can that really be decided by 4 or 5 people standing around being asked questions?
Thank you very much indeed. Now, just for some clarity here, my understanding, I'm very happy to be corrected, is that there are outline plans for 3 debates during the election, which will start off with all the sort of Great Britain-wide party leaders, then narrow down to the 3 current largest MP number parties, and then the final one will be Miliband and Cameron head-to-head. And the discussion, of course, comes from Ofcom's draft recommendation that the Green Party is a not major enough of a minor party to be included, to have to be included in that first debate, although that decision is still only in draft form, and it's still only advisory to the broadcasters who don't have to follow it. Right, who'd like to talk us on this one a bit more, thanks to John's opening? Nobody, it seems.
I'm waiting for someone else. If no one wants to, then I'll
Go on, Leon, off you go.
I personally believe these debates are an absolute joke. They don't do anything for our democracy. As has been pointed out, they work in America and whatnot because they have a presidential system. You're voting for one person. In a parliamentary system, you know, I want. I'm currently in Hull supporting the candidate here. Well, I want a debate between the candidates in Hull North. I'm not going to get it, but it'd be more helpful for voters in Hull to see, other national party leaders. I just don't think they're helpful for general elections at all. On the actual question, though, I agree. I think the Greens should be involved, and I've said since the start of this rubbish that I think if we're going to have these debates and UKIP are going to be involved, I think the Greens should be as well. They've got their MP first, and not through defections either. So that's the first point I'd make. But David Cameron pulling out is not necessarily pulled out. Let's just say, I think all he's said is if the Greens don't get a spot, then he won't join in. I think he's quite right with that. Now, you could argue maybe he is trying to be a bit sneaky about it, hoping the Greens divide the Labour support in the debates. But if you're a cynic, I suppose you would say that. I'm personally not too much of a cynic to believe that, but I agree with that position. If the Greens don't get a spot, I think the debates will be useless. The Greens are an up-and-coming party.
Thank you. A few comments from people on Twitter before I come to the rest of our panel. Adam Keeley, at Adam_Keeley, how can Cameron not want a debate? He wants the Greens, another party, in as well, and the SNP and Plaid Cymru should be in too. Adam Hawkes, the Green Party is UKIP for young people. If UKIP are in, shouldn't the Greens be too, particularly as youth votes are an issue. Roger Patterson, Councillor R. Patterson, and several of these are previous guests, hello to all of you. Only the three main parties who could be part of the next government should take part. UKIP will not be one of them. David Jeffrey, David Jeffrey _ the Greens have not kept their deposit in any by-election of this Parliament, as far as I know. To say they're more than a minor party is laughable. Anyone want to respond to any of those points?
Yes, I'm happy to come in there.
Matthew.
I think absolutely the Greens should be, if we're going to have the debates, and I'm not all that bothered whether we do or not, but if the premise is that we are having them, then of course the Greens should be taking part. They have an MP, they have hundreds of councillors, they have triple the number of Lib Dem MEPs at the moment, sadly from my point of view. So yes, they're a minor party, but they're one of the bigger and more credible minor parties. And let's face it, again, sadly from my point of view, they are fairly often now polling ahead of the Liberal Democrats. And so I think if you have the Lib Dems in the debate, which clearly you have to as a current party of UK-wide government, then I don't see how you can't have the Greens in the debate. Having said that, I kind of agree with Leon. We're not a presidential system in this country, and so I'm not really bothered whether we have the debates or not.
Thank you very much. Bradley, coming to you, because you're coming from Scotland at the moment, and of course in Scotland you have potentially the largest party that will be elected to the House of Commons from Scotland won't be represented from any other part of the UK. What's your view on this debate issue?
On whether we should have the debates or not, we probably don't need them, but we have them, and I think that the Greens should be included in that. On whether or not the SNP and Plaid Cymru and the likes should be included, I say yeah. Obviously, I'm an SNP member and supporter. And to have UKIP and even the Liberal Democrats involved in the debate, but not the SNP, who have more members than both the two parties mentioned combined, and are polling as if they're going to win Scotland and have some sort of power in the Commons. I think it's only fair for the people of the rest of the UK to hear what we have to say, because we could possibly have some sort of power for the whole of the UK.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. John?
On this SNP implied issue, I think, to be honest, SNP implied should only be allowed to go as far debates-wise for Scottish and Welsh national debates. The problem I have with them becoming part of the UK-wide debates is if you currently add the polling of the SNP and Plaid together, you don't reach the polling of the Greens or UKIP. So I think to include them in like a British major national party debate would be slightly silly that way.
Yeah, thank you. A few comments. Kami Singh, who's another former guest, would agree with that. He's pointing out that there will be specific debates in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland involving the relevant parties in each of those nations. David Jeffrey points out that the Greens have been up and coming since the 1970s. The Pyro of Camelot at Pyro Annis. The Greens should be in the debates, in my opinion. However, the debates themselves will be a complete joke, as Leon said. Ian, a confused ninja. In our politics, we are voting for both a person and a party. You may like the person, not the party, and in his view, that's not the right system. And Adam Hawkes, again, the media and the parties play off uneducated Joe Public in these debates. On the whole, they're not really very useful. Anyone want to reply to any of this? By the way, Joe will be back with us shortly. His laptop has decided to install some updates and reboot at this point.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Gareth. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Is that I think the SNP and Plaid Cymru should absolutely be part of the debates in their countries. But no, they shouldn't be part of the UK-wide debates. They're not UK-wide parties. They are quite clearly nationalist parties. And so I think it's a ludicrous idea that they should be part of the UK-wide debates. I just want to make one further point. Some people suggest that, well, you know, maybe if you have the Greens, there's too many people on the one platform. If you look at some of the TV debates, leaders' debates in other European countries, Scandinavian countries, they can have 8 or 9 people on the platform for their TV debate, and as long as it's chaired well enough, you know, there's no reason why that shouldn't be an informative and hopefully entertaining debate. So, I mean, I think that particular point is a bit daft, really.
Oh yeah, we have 5 on here.
Can I, very quickly?
Yeah, please, Bradley. Was that Leon?
That was me, yeah.
There are just a couple of responses specifically to that point.
Oh, right.
David Jeffrey says, why would the rest of the UK give a flying flip about what the SNP thinks? Now, you've responded to him, Bradley. If we hold the balance of power over a minority government, then I'm sure you would care. Blue Liberal, and I'm not even going to attempt to read the Japanese version of his name that he's put on there. Quebec nationalists are invited into the English debates in Canada, despite having no Anglophone support or indeed standing outside of Quebec. That's a good point, and the debates in Canada, which are again, you know, a parliamentary system like ours, do have a large number of parties. There they had the Green Party on the last one, despite them not electing any MPs in the previous Parliament at all. And Matthew is right that they have them in other countries, and they have a series of, sometimes a lot of parties on them. Germany, however, and when Joe rejoins us, as he's trying to, he might be able to add on to this one. I think at the last elections in Germany, they had 2 sets of debates. One set was between the Chancellor candidates from the 2 biggest parties, the SPD and the CDU, and then they had another set of debates between the leaders of the smaller parties who would form coalition partners or supplying confidence arrangements with those other parties. So, you know, the FDP and Die Linke and the Greens and Bundes-90 and so on. So apparently Joe's telling me I'm correct. Now, Joe, we can't see you, but can we hear you?
I think you might do, yeah?
We can hear you, yes. What do you think about the issue about leaders' debates, and how does it happen over there?
Well, I think the mention of adding the Green Party, UKIP, just would make the debate into a farce, but like the German one, I would actually consider it, because it gives the credentials of... am I still with you? There we are. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Leon, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I suppose I'm wanting to reply directly to Matthew and get a response from him. The point seems to have already been made. I must have just switched off briefly, I'm afraid. It's been a long day. No, essentially, you know, I think you're quite right, Matthew, in saying that the SNP is a nationalist party, and so only applies to Scotland. But in the UK, if the SNP could hold the balance of power as the Lib Dems did in 2010, then should we involve them in the debates?
Well, I mean, I think there's lots of other ways. There's plenty of other media where people can find out what the SNP might do in that situation, and what they might expect if they formed, if not a formal coalition, then a supply agreement. But I'm afraid I stick to my point that they should absolutely be in the debates in their respective countries. Of course, that's absolutely right, as major parties in Scotland and in Wales. But if we were to say that they should be in the UK-wide debates, well, then what about the DUP? What about Alliance? What about Sinn Féin? I mean, I think once we start down that route, we're in a difficulty. Having said that, though, of course, arguing against myself, the Greens are only the England and Welsh Green Party. People forget that the Scottish one and the Northern Irish ones are separate political parties.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the Green Party of England and Wales. That's the official name of the party.
Yeah.
Bradley, the Green Party in Scotland has quite a specific identity, doesn't it? And it was very much part of the Yes campaign in the recent referendum, wasn't it?
Yeah, the convener is Patrick Harvey. They weren't so much part of the Yes campaign; they formed their own sort of side campaign.
Okay.
Green Yes.
Oh.
Fair enough. A few more comments that people have made online here, and there's quite a discussion going on. Cami Singh points out that it's quite courageous for the Prime Minister to take a stand to allow a smaller, principled leftist alternative, even if the effect of it is to actually hurt Labour and the SNP more than anyone else. Dave Poole at DavePoole_26, they should be included. Inclusion would be beneficial in highlighting their ludicrous policies. Cameron S at Cameron_surname. It'd be nice, loving Matthew's overt and covert, Greens are more credible minor party, when he makes digs at your party, saying that to you, John. In the arguments going on between you and Matthew. Adam Keeley. So Matthew doesn't want a party bigger than the Lib Dems in the debate. The SNP are currently really the third biggest party. Will Bates points out that he can't watch the debate online. He's following it on Twitter, but that UKIP won far more seats than the Greens in the elections in 2014. So, anyone want to respond to any of those
Can
points?
I just come back?
Okay. Does anyone want to respond to any of those points before I ask John to round up and close this part of the debate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, everyone's saying yes, so I'm going to click at random. Gone to Bradley.
Bias.
And coming on John's point about the people in England being able to look up what the SNP stand for, I know quite a few English people, and they don't have a clue what the SNP stand for. The SNP are considered and reported in English media anyway as being anti-English, nationalistic lunatics. But really, if they're Sean, if you're if we were included in the debate, we'd be able to obviously talk about our policies, which aren't as crazy as people would think.
Let's face it, though, Bradley. No one in a party thinks their party is crazy, do they?
Well, we just have to, yeah, exactly. But
Isn't that just like any party?
Yeah, it is.
I suppose,
Yeah.
But further to that, David said nobody would really care about what the SNP said. Why does he think anybody in Scotland gives a damn what the Tories or UKIP are saying? We've only got one Tory MP here. What having two debates does is give Labour two bites at the cherry at the SNP.
Well,
Isn't there that joke that Scotland has more pandas than Tory MPs?
Yes, but on the other hand, Scotland also has the Conservatives as the third largest group in the Scottish Parliament and the best, arguably, well, certainly equal best political leader of anyone in Scotland in the form of Ruth Davidson. So it's not just numbers; it's also equality.
So, Gareth, can I come back?
Matthew, then I'll ask Joe and Leon for their final comments before John closes.
Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, you're entirely right, Gareth. I mean, much to my chagrin, obviously, the Tories are a bigger political force in Scotland than the Lib Dems. And so, the Tories, the Lib Dems, Labour do organise in Scotland. The SNP choose, it's entirely of their own choosing, because of their ideological beliefs, to only organise... well, of course, yes, they stand for the UK Parliament, but they only actually organise in Scottish constituencies. And so, Bradley is yet to explain, to my satisfaction at least, why they should feature in a UK-wide debate.
I think Bradley's point, just for speed, is that they might well affect propping up a UK-wide government.
Yeah, I can see that, and I admire some of the things they've done in Scotland. They're broadly social democratic. I'm someone on the left of my party, and I could theoretically see maybe a Labour Lib Dem administration being propped up by the SNP after May.
Yes, Leon.
I'm sorry that I just got a little. I was a bit sick in my mouth at the idea of a Labour, Lib Dem, SNP government.
Oh, you love it, Leon. You'll love it. It'll be great.
Oh no, it just makes me it makes me feel a bit depressed, to be honest. I just want to go and hide away. I'm going to log off now and see you later.
Drink.
Anyway, no, the point I want to make is there was a tweet. I believe it was Will Bates. I can't watch the debate right now due to dippy internet, but here's a handy graphic. It's basically looking at the local elections and European elections last year between seats won for UKIP and the Greens. I'm sorry, but I just can't help but think that that's completely useless for this debate. That's got nothing to do with Parliament. I'm sorry, that just really annoyed me. The Greens got their first MP before UKIP. Their first elected MP before UKIP. I'm sorry, but UKIP just have to accept that fact. They may have two MPs, but they got them through defections, of course. That people will.
They were then elected in by-elections, though, weren't they, Leon?
They were then elected in by-elections, but I mean, their argument was vote for change. Yeah, vote for the same person. Well, it wasn't.
So really, they should have lost.
Not necessarily, no. It depends whether the MP is popular in their constituency or not, and clearly these as people were. I mean, Douglas Carswell didn't surprise me. Mark Reckless, I have to confess, I'd never even heard of him before he defected. I never heard of him. He's one of those people who stand in the background of public events and don't say much. Well,
you didn't hear the story of him being too drunk to vote in Parliament soon after he was elected.
I didn't until after he defected.
Sorry, bit of a.
Again, it was so uninteresting that I hadn't heard of it until then. But no, that graphic just really annoyed me. It's got nothing to do with the UK-wide elections, and it's just another UKIPper just saber rattling. It just gets on my nerves. I'm sorry.
Right. Joe, any last comments before John closes this topic?
I would, to round up, I would say that you have either the three major parties or have 5 of them which will just drag out, or you could do like a German system, not being biased at all with being here, but it does tackle the credentials of in each candidate one against another. But also, I could like to come back to what Leon said about earlier in the debate, is about wanting to hear about the candidates from the constituency. That's a very interesting debate because I believe it's every general election is based on the battle within each constituency, which I believe is true, to be fair.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Right, John, just before you close this topic, a couple of final comments that people have made online. Cameron S. is telling us that defections and then elections, so the 2 UKIP MPs are no less MPs than any other. David Jeffrey points out 1 Tory MP above the border and no SNP MPs below the border. And Ian at A Confused Ninja points out that in a poll focused purely on policies, the Greens were the winners, so they should be involved. John?
Yeah, just to close those. What I found most interesting was all of us weren't overly bothered if we have these debates. And I was quite interested by the idea of having more local debates, because I think that would be really good. On the Greens, I mean. and who gets involved. I suppose that's the problem Ofcom and the broadcaster has faced, is no one is going to be completely happy with whatever result they give.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for taking part in that discussion. Our next discussion is led, and we chose these at the start of the programme, is led by Leon. Off you go, sir.
Right. My topic is essentially why I find democracy to be the most annoying system of government ever thought of. Yet, it's still the best system of government ever. Now, the reason I find it the most annoying, anyone who actually reads any news or opinion polls or is involved in politics on the doorstep will come across those voters who insist that they are right about key issues. Immigration, the EU, death penalty, renationalising industries, things like that. You will come across them and they will tell you they are right. They're absolutely right. I'm right because I'm a real person, even though you have stacks of evidence that point out why they are not right. I find democracy annoying because as people involved in politics, we actually have to listen to that and we actually have to respect that. And now this is terrible for me because I'm actually an election candidate at the local elections this year. But I get very, very annoyed by this idea that I have to have any shred of respect for someone who is insisting that they are right purely because they're a voter. No, they're not necessarily right, and it gets on my nerves. The reason, of course, that it is the best system of government is the fact that we do get to choose our voters. Not voters, sorry. We do get to choose our leaders. I know, that was a bit odd. You get to choose your voters. I wish. I think everybody would love that. Anyway, now we get to choose our leaders, which is always good. There are downsides, of course, because those leaders could be completely wrong as well. Nigel Farage. But another problem I have with unfettered democracy is how you could end up with rather authoritarian measures just because they're popular. I mean, imagine, for example, I've seen two... There's a paradigm of democracy between the left and the right. The left seems to be at the moment talking about the fact that the public seem to be in favour of renationalisation of key industries they call it, and the railway as well. Whereas on the right, there are people who are quite happy they seem to be in favour of the death penalty, and it seems to be a very small majority. On both sides, it seems to be a small majority, I believe. If we were to put that to a public vote, and I suppose I do put this to the UKIP because they are part of the Pan-European Party of Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy, which concerns me. Would we put death penalty to a public vote, knowing that it has a slight, well, every now and again it gets a slight majority agreement? But would they also put a vote on renationalisation of railway and public service, key industries? Sorry, I doubt all parties would. But no, that's really my point. Not very organised. But yeah, there are my annoyances with democracy and why I find it the most annoying system of government ever.
Thank you very much, Leon. Matthew.
Thanks very much. Yeah, well, I mean, certainly I think that, democracy is the best form of government that we have. All the others that have been tried have been proven to fail, but certainly on the issue that Leon points out in regards to people sometimes having views which we disagree with, well, on the doorstep, and of course I find that I'm out regularly knocking on the doors at the moment, but that kind of is democracy, isn't it? And I quite often politely find myself saying, well, I disagree with you, but again, it kind of goes back to the news that we were covering earlier on. They're perfectly entitled to hold their views, and I spend my time on the doorsteps trying to convince folks to vote for me. Some will, hopefully lots, but some won't, and you do have to respect that, because ultimately that's democracy. And Leon making the point that, well, they're wrong because I have lots of evidence that they're wrong. Well, we can all produce evidence to support our point of view, Leon, can't we?
Could I come back to that very quickly and quote an independent article that I'm sure Matthew would probably agree with? I'm going to put it out on Twitter as well. And there was a survey for the Royal Statistical Society at King's College London, and they looked at things like benefit fraud, immigration, crime, teen pregnancy, the things that the Daily Mail like to get on board with and go on as though they're big problems. Well, they found that people overestimate all these problems, and actually not as bad as people think. And I would have thought that Matthew, as a social democrat, would appreciate that. The fact that actually benefit fraud isn't as much of a problem as people think it is, and immigration isn't as much of a problem as they think it is. I would have thought people like Matthew would like to put the boot to these people who are essentially saying that these are big...
But that's a problem with the media, Leon. That's a problem with us not having a media which informs people well enough. That's not an issue with voters taking a particular stance on something, which is entirely their right.
Can I be really controversial and say I just find that to be a really lazy position, that people don't have to go out there and look things up themselves. They can just rely on an apparently corrupt media. I agree that media has many problems and it has lots of bias, which is why we get these polls that show that, as the Independent put it, British public wrong about nearly everything. Well, that's the media's fault, I agree, but surely, if we're going to be an informed democracy, an active democracy, people should actually be going out there and looking things up if they claim to care.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to John now, because just a few comments people have made, and then John. Ian, at A Confused Ninja, democracy needs the engagement of the population. We saw in Scotland the engagement happened when there was perceived real choice. That's real. That's right, isn't it, John? Do we actually give people a choice that they feel worth going out and voting for?
Well, I suppose the obvious answer to that one is obviously no. Voter turnout is continually falling. Party membership is continually falling, mostly. Some of us aren't. But I suppose my point with this is democracy is annoying. Democracy is convincing a huge number of people, all of which have different opinions, that your set of opinions are the best. So it's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be annoying. But it's the best we're ever going to have. Lots of people aren't suddenly going to say, we all agree completely on everything. So, what was it? There was a great Winston Churchill quote, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. And I think the point there is that everyone will have a different opinion. And if we want to, I suppose the reason we have democracy is we want to make the country better. We want to make the lives of people in the country better. And the way to do that is to argue with each other continuously. And that's just annoying, arguing with everyone continuously. That's the best thing we can do.
If I'm not misquoting Churchill here, he also said democracy is the worst form of government there is, except for all of the others.
Which is the point I'm making.
Yeah. I remember in my first election, when I first stood as a candidate, longer ago than I care to mention, I knocked on a house that some people were just moving into, and it backed onto a railway line, and they said, well, if we vote for you, can you take the railway line away? And I said, well, no, I can't. And they said, why not? I said, well, did you know it was there when you moved in? Yes. I said, and why did you buy this house? They said, well, because it was cheaper. So that's possibly because it was next to a railway line. Then they said, well, we'll have to vote for the other guy because he said he could shift it.
Can I come in on that? Because there was something that I remember really annoyed me, actually. Again, I'm going
Joe after you.
Yeah, I'm going on things that just annoy me. I was wandering around the hall leafleting with the Conservative prospective parliamentary candidate for Hull North, Deanna Davidson. And she...
the candidates are available.
Yeah, of course.
Carry on.
No limited advertising at all. And I was leafleting a house, and she was chatting to a voter, so I went along. And this voter said to her, "Oh, if you can sort this out for me, I'll vote for you." But this was a decision that was taken by the council. She's not a councillor or anything like that. And I just think, are you really that dense that you don't realise that she has the same power to change things as you do? It just really annoys me. It's that kind of attitude that people have. Oh, you do this for me, I'll vote for you. Oh, go away.
Joe, let's come to you. We'll give Leon time to breathe.
Calm down.
Well, in regards to what Leon said, then, you know, it's up to an MP to support council's decision to go in accordance to what best, really. But back to democracy. Yeah, if it works, it works. But sometimes you need to look at the flaws of it. I know this is quite a vacuous sort of argument, but if it's going to work, then make sure it works the best it can. And obviously, we look back to the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression with Je suis Charlie, which for me is sort of a divine principle of what a democracy looks towards. For me, anyway.
Thank you, Bradley. Democracy, it's quite annoying, isn't it? I mean, from the point of view of someone outside Scotland, obviously there was a 18-month-long referendum campaign, and the result was 56% voted no to independence. Why can't people just accept that's the result? That's democracy, isn't it?
Democracy is a bleeding nightmare. I'm not going to mention what happened in September, but or I suppose I'll have to.
Yes.
I don't think it's people not accepting the result. I think it's more to say. I've heard that quite a lot. Actually, people say move on, accept the result. I've completely accepted it. It happened. It's probably a good argument to why I'm annoyed with democracy, but it's probably the best thing we've got. And back on the point I was making about moving on, it'd be like saying Labour lost, move on, vote Tory, we just have a Tory government. And that's really quite a key part in democracy. People have beliefs and they're not going to change them. Like, I'm not going to change my belief about independence.
Thank you. Right. Who wanted to add something here? Lee, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've talked a lot about people not giving up their opinions. Recently, I was campaigning in North Leicestershire for Andy McWilliam, a great candidate.
There are other candidates available. I'm going to have to say this a lot over the next few months, aren't I, as people promote their local candidates.
But,
for example, if I would sit here and go, Catherine Fletcher, the Conservative candidate for Ellesmere Port Neston, is brilliant, there are other candidates available.
I
John.
could actually confirm that as well.
I started chatting to this man who was handing out leaflets, and he went to me, "But do you not feel you're too liberal in UKIP?" And I went, "No, I think we're offering a very broad, very fine policy." And he went, "Yeah, but the National Front around here, they're just so great to us. They represent everything I think. Why can't you change to be more like them?" And I went, "Because I'm not them." And he then said, "Well, I'm not voting for you then," which I thought was the oddest argument I've ever come across.
See, that's the type of thing that gets on my nerves.
Yeah, we picked up on that. Matthew, you wanted to say
Did
something.
I mention it?
You know you're in trouble, don't you, when UKIP are too liberal? You know you know you're in difficulty there. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make the point, and this will be interesting post-May, won't it, is that if we do have a hung parliament again, and I mean, who knows, but it looks fairly likely, is that democracy working or is that democracy not working? I mean, from my point of view as a Liberal Democrat, because if we're realistic, it's probably our only chance of being part of, continuing to be part of UK-wide government, I hope there is a hung parliament. But I wanted to make a point in regards to who then has a mandate for government. Yes, there'll be a largest party, whoever that is, Labour or the Tories. But in terms of the wrangling that will go on then with some of the other parties, some of the smaller parties, to form a government, as happened in May 2010. As much as I was pleased to see Lib Dems in government, who then has a mandate, and is that democracy working?
Thank you. A couple more comments people have made before I ask Leon to close this debate and hopefully finish it without having some sort of coronary. Alessia, who was on the other week, hello, at Upon a Cloud. I'm not really a fan of democracy, but since we have it, we have to deal with it, a bit like periods. But I don't like it. Perfectly reasonable point. Adam Hawkes, and of course, naturally, I've gone and was past. Democracy works as long as people are not idiots and agree with me and my views. End of. Which again is it's an awful lot of debate going on here. Cameron S, I think, is accusing me of not being his dad. But I'll have to come back to you on that one, Cameron, because there are some parts of my university experience that I can't remember. And I'm lying. Gareth sounds like an M&S advert when he does that voice. Other candidates are available. We'll come back to that later on. John, would you like to close this part of the debate for us? No, Leon. Yeah. Sorry, I was about to give it away there.
Well, that was confusing.
See, stupid voter here doing completely the wrong thing.
Indeed, councillor. Resign. Let's start a hashtag.
My voters can resign me in 4 months.
Yes. No,
at least me and Gareth have mandates.
Oh, stop!
I think you'll find you're the one who's no longer single. Anyway, that's a whole other point. Haha, sorry.
Congratulations, Matthew, by the way.
Bad pun. Carry on, Leon.
Anyway, yes, I started this off by an absolute rant and how democracy is terrible and this and that. I'm going to end it by saying why we should value it and why it is actually a good system. I may have my annoyances, I should say, with it. We may have stupid voters and this, that, and the other, and I may get called an evil, patronising so-and-so because of it. But it really is the best system we have, because, as I've said, we get to choose our leaders. As normal members of the public, we get to forge the future of our nation. And I think that's a big responsibility and I can see you grinning, John. I know what you're thinking.
I didn't say anything.
Yeah, you didn't need to. I think that's a big responsibility and a big duty that we should all take very seriously. I think we should ignore the likes of Russell Brand who say don't vote.
Quite right.
Yes. It's dangerous. We know what happens when people don't vote. We get extremists. Because the extremists are the ones who vote. They are the ones who turn out because they're adamant to make that change. Well, we should be adamant to make that change as well. And I think that is why democracy is also the best system there is for government out there. We can have a choice, we can have a say, but it's a responsibility and we have the choice to say if we want to do it, we can. If we don't want to do it, then we accept the consequences, don't we?
Thank you very much, Leon. Now, our final topic for tonight is to be introduced by Joe, who, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice, has had a further problem with his computer. However, this is one that will be of particular interest to Manic Merkel, at Manic_Merkel, who has tweeted us tonight a couple of times. This is an issue about the role of Angela Merkel in modern Europe. She's often rated as one of, if not the most powerful woman in the world. There are a lot of people some people on Twitter who seem to think she actually runs the UK. But she's certainly a very long-standing Chancellor of Germany. She has had a profound effect on the European Union and the development of the euro, particularly in responding to the financial crisis that engulfed Spain, Ireland, and Greece. Angela Merkel, is she the Queen of Europe? Who'd like to join in on this one and talk a little about Auntie Angie?
John?
Yeah?
Fire away.
Go on.
Do I think Angela Merkel is Queen of Europe? In a way, perhaps. Germany is the most powerful economy in Europe at the moment. German money keeps the Eurozone going. Decisions in relation to the Eurozone and the EU, German influence is very key. when David Cameron set out to renegotiate his relationship with the EU, the person whose opinion was always asked was Germany's, was Merkel's. So in that respect, I think Angela Merkel is Queen of Europe. If you look at things in another way, foreign policy-wise perhaps, relations with people outside Europe, I think it's a much more mixed picture. People like France and the UK have a much bigger foreign policy presence. So in that respect, I don't think Angela Merkel is the Queen of Europe.
Thank you very much. That's true, isn't it? Because France and the UK have permanent seats on the UN Security Council. We are two of the countries who are involved most in military operations abroad, who trade the most across the rest of the world. And yet, somehow, despite that global presence, Germany is much more of a power in Europe. Bradley, I don't know if you want to say anything on this one.
I don't really have much opinion about Angela
Just
Merkel.
think about the point of view of someone who has obviously campaigned very strongly in favour of Scotland becoming Europe's newest nation, newest independent nation state. How do you think the relationship between an independent Scotland and Germany might be? I mean, to what extent might Scotland have to rely more on Germany than it had before, for example?
I think it would just be like the current relationship we have at the moment. Maybe we would rely on them a bit more, depending on which currency we would have used if we did say yes. But I think if we stick with the pound, then I think we would have relied on or had more connection with the rest of the UK more than we would Germany.
We've had another tweet from Manic Merkel here, which I'm about to retweet. It is a glorious one, which is finally what we've all been waiting for. I reiterate the point: I am Queen of Europe, and I think.
It's just a cunning disguise. That is, in fact, Merkel talking to us.
Yes, it
is, yeah.
There's not much else to do on Sonntagabend, is there? Other than tune into this. So that's possibly tweet of the night. It's a hard one.
Well, let's clean that one up anyway.
Yeah. Welcome back, Joe. Let's go to Joe, because Joe has been studying German and Germany. He's currently living and studying in Germany, and this was his topic. Tell us a bit about Frau Merkel.
Well, Frau Merkel. Let's give a bit of Hintergrund. Ein Überblick. She's born in Hamburg, raised in East Germany, which makes her quite special. But does that make her? But the one thing I've noticed with Frau Merkel is the way that she's very calm, incomparable with Gerhard Schroeder before her, with the lavishness of what he did. And of course, he got a job with Gazprom with Russia. But with the Russian relations, I believe that Mrs. Merkel or Miss Merkel or Frau Merkel shows the capabilities of dealing, which can be a serious threat to foreign policy and also the way she is a queen of Europe. She leads Europe with foreign policy in some cases, and this is probably the most serious case where Frau Merkel has led Europe and showing that she is actually Queen of Europe. And of course, we look to the Euro deal and the bailouts as well. But of course, we look at Britain, no real role in the Euro. It doesn't need a role. So this encompasses the fact that Germany has a major role to play. So, but obviously she won. She won this bailout. She left Southern Europe to possible depletion and made sure there was bailouts in Spain and Italy, which would have been catastrophic for the EU and Europe in general. So, because of that reason, it encompasses Europe around Germany, and the cards in Germany's favour. If anyone wants to go on from that.
Thank you. A few more points people have made online here. Adam Hawkes points out that Angela Merkel is the most powerful woman in Europe of recent decades, second only to Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
Cameron S points out who was at the very centre of the front line in the Unity March. It was Merkel. Adam Keeley, Angela Merkel wants a big job in Europe after her chancellorship. Of course, that means doing nothing like Neil Kinnock did. And a confused injury in here. She has something that a lot of our politicians don't have. I think people connect with her and like her. Her emotions seem real. Anyone want to comment on this or add anything to it in terms of the role of Germany and Europe in the EU and Britain?
Yeah. I mean, I think from an outsider's perspective, I've never been to Germany, so all I know of her is what I see in the press.
Shame.
Bless you to whoever that was. But it appears to me is that she's made herself into somewhat of the mother of the nation in Germany, and that's if you can if you can turn yourself as a leader into a kind of mother or father of the nation, that's a very powerful position to be in politically. And I was sorry, what's wrong with Leon there?
I'm sorry, I've just seen a tweet. It's fine.
Oh, okay. And and I was going to make the point that in the middle of the Unity rally today was Hollande and then Merkel, and some, maybe unfairly given the nature of the event, but some did point out that David Cameron was much further down the line, and I think that does say something about who has what power in Europe today. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned Margaret Thatcher, but it's interesting that I believe if Merkel does see out this term, and of course she may well stand again, but if she serves out this term, she will have served longer as the head of government in Germany than Margaret Thatcher did here. That's quite a substantial achievement.
Could I come back on that?
Yeah, Joe, go.
Well, I think it's also a question of identity, and if we're talking about Britain and Germany's role within the EU, and especially Merkel's standpoint as well. Well, if you take into consideration the fall of the Berlin Wall, it shows strongly in her head as an East German-raised woman with Germany encapsulated with a lot of history. The EU for her shows a unity and encompasses also the strength that unity brings, while Britain, of course, as we know, is an island. It's like an island mentality that we have, potentially to have ourselves distanced away from the powers that is the EU, Brussels or Strasbourg.
Thank you. There's some wonderful photoshopping going on here.
Yeah.
It really is quite astonishing. Anyone else want to add anything about talking about Europe in general and European relations more widely, perhaps?
Yeah, I think I'll probably come in on this mostly on a sort of Europe-wide thing and European Union thing, mostly because I don't know much about German politics and Angela Merkel. And from what I can tell, she seems to be a fantastic politician, very successful. Seems to be popular. I don't know if anyone wants to correct me. I'm quite happy with that.
No,
on a European level, I'm a Eurosceptic, so John will probably love me for that. All right, that's just charming. No, I'm a Eurosceptic, so I do sometimes feel that Germany does rule Europe. Now, there are some tinfoil hat wearers who say, oh, well, that's the Nazi success, we'll call it. Well, I'm not one of them. But it does feel like sometimes, I think David Jason referred to the European Union as the Fourth Reich once. It does feel like Germany does rule Europe. I think some people said people do go to Angela Merkel and Germany to say, well, shall we do this or not?
But Leon,
yeah.
Can I challenge you on that? The reason,
of course, yeah.
The reason for that, Leon, is because Britain has, much to my chagrin as a pro-European, been Eurosceptic, and therefore we've always been behind the curve, and Germany's always been in front of the curve in terms of what's going on in Europe. So I'm afraid I blame the likes of you and
Don't blame me.
and John well, Eurosceptics, I mean, for the fact that because Britain is largely Eurosceptic, we're always behind. We're always saying no until the very last minute and then finally agreeing.
I'm afraid to say we come back to my point on democracy, because we've gone through. I mean, recently we've gone through a period where 1 week we're pro-EU as a country, the next we're Eurosceptic. We don't know where we stand, so our leaders are...
Really? When have we been pro-EU? I mean, I wish we were, but when have we?
Government ever.
The government. But the government is... but John, that's... The government maybe, but I think, almost every poll that I see on this says that the country, and again, I'd largely blame the media for this, but the country is largely Eurosceptic. I mean, I'm yet to see a poll where we're not.
I always find when people say, it's quite fine in terms of on particular policies, government or opposition announce policy X, and people take often their cue from the press and what they read about it, because that's what they see. But when it comes to more general attitudes towards things like taxation, the European Union, and the NHS and so on, these things build up over decades, and it's how people feel and what they learn, and these aren't fly-by-night things. And I always find it a little bit, sorry to say, Matthew, patronising when people say it's the media's fault.
Yeah,
but Gareth,
let me finish my point, and then you're going to come back in. Is it not equally likely that the media goes, you know what, actually, most people are Eurosceptic, so there's no point us trying to sell newspapers by telling them they're all wrong? Is it not often the case on big things like that? The media reflects people's views. It doesn't necessarily instruct them what to think.
Well, I mean, I think that's partly true as well, but there's no doubt about it that when you have almost all of our popular press being Eurosceptic, that clearly has an impact. There's no doubt about it. To be utterly naive to think any other. I mean, I would have thought that if most of our press was pro-European, that would have an impact on public opinion as well. So, I mean, you're right to an extent.
Let me tell you, Matthew, why I think you're wrong. Because
right, okay.
you say that about it's the press's fault that people are Eurosceptic, and at the same time, when we hear people on the opposite side of the argument from you, people who are, I would say, are not Eurosceptic but anti-EU, they don't trust the Prime Minister to have a referendum. They say it's not a real referendum because everyone, there'll be a conspiracy to get people to vote to stay in. Which would indicate that the situation is the exact opposite of what you said. So if we take those two arguments, is perhaps the truth that people are clever enough to make up their own minds, and the newspapers reflect what people say on this issue rather than
well, they certainly don't tell them what their opinions, do they?
Well, some of them do. Joe.
This is a very quick point before Leon wants to come in. We could also look at the economic downturn and what usually that leads to. People look for a scapegoat. Maybe the media as well aid that, but scapegoating, people want to look for something to blame instead of looking into themselves. Of course, that may seem a bit horrendous to say, but it's something that naturally happens. Look, the Great Depression. Germany allowed in Hitler, the rise of fascism probably led that sense of unease led to probably to the Great World War, the Second World War.
A couple of comments people have made here online, then I'll come to Leon and Bradley, and then we'll close this debate, I think, with some final comments. Cameron is telling us, Cameron_surname, here's an idea. Instead of saying no until the end and then agreeing, how about we just say no? The Manic Merkel is thanking you, Joe, and she's tweeted, and I've retweeted it for you.
Thank you.
I think you'll like that. Ian, Germany has placed itself at the centre of Europe. The UK has always tried to be on the fringes.
Right, exactly.
And so the issue really there is you might not like it, but is it a reflection of what people want? Leon.
Well, I would actually agree with that. The reason we've placed ourselves on the fringes is that seems to be what the people want, I'm afraid, Matthew. I do agree with you, Matthew.
Yeah, but you can't then...
Hang on, Matthew, hang on.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm about to agree with you. Just save for that moment. Just save that. We've got a coalition going on. I'm a Conservative, you're a Lib Dem. We've got a coalition going on. I agree with you. The media does paint a very negative image of the EU. Okay, and sometimes even I, as a Eurosceptic, look at it and think, "Oh, come on, don't be so ridiculous." All right, but the fact is, if the public are Eurosceptic, then as Gareth says, even if he is meant to be in an independent chair, then
Yeah.
it's no.
But Leon,
Leave him, Matthew. Do I need to mute you?
just one small
It's
point.
no. I know. I'll let you get your point in, Matthew. I will let you get your point in. It's no wonder that the media would present a more Eurosceptic attitude. Now, the fact is that I've seen some posts. I follow the pro-European British group, British Influence. Now, they're happy to retweet or post poll results that show that the public are pro-independence. I'm sure you probably, Matthew, follow the same account on Facebook and Twitter. It's quite an interesting account. Whereas UKIP, of course, will only ever post the polling results that suggest the public are against the European Union. It changes every week. We don't actually know what the public think about the European Union, which is why we need a nationwide debate on the issue. I'm happy for that.
Thank you. Matthew, before your small point, you can include this that someone's tweeted in your answer. Tammy Singh at Cameron Singh CL. I think Matthew is saying that our German-dominated Europe is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and this could be abated by more active UK participation in the political processes. So respond to Leon, and then respond to that, please.
Well, it kind of two things together. I mean, my point to Leon would be is that he's saying that if we're Eurosceptic as a country, then that's what we are. Well, okay, fine. But what I'm saying is he can't then moan, as he appeared to be earlier on, that Germany was dominating Europe. You know, the two things correlate. If we're not up front and playing a major part and a leading role in Europe because we're Eurosceptic, you can't then moan that other people are filling that gap, can you?
Okay, fair enough. Bradley. It's your turn, sir.
Going back to the original question, is Angela Merkel Queen of Europe? I think with the amount of power she has, and if she's anything like her Twitter parody account, then she is Queen of Europe.
Yeah, fair enough. And I have to say, I was pretty persuaded by the picture as well. John, do you have any final comments before Joe closes this debate?
A couple of really tiny things. First of all, the final thing about Merkel being Queen of Europe. When Cameron has gone to negotiate, he hasn't gone to Tusk, he hasn't gone to Juncker, he hasn't gone to Hollande, he's gone to Merkel. And if that's not a sign of anyone being in charge of Europe, what is? Secondly, I'm going to agree with Matthew a bit.
Wow.
Here we are.
Wow.
Matthew's saying if we are Eurosceptic, we can't moan about Germany being in charge. That's fair enough. I think it's time for our politicians to realise the UK is a Eurosceptic nation. Follow that through and we should leave. So I totally agree with Matthew.
that wouldn't be my end point, of course.
Of course not. Just calm yourself. John, do you not think there's a difference between Eurosceptic and anti-EU? Is it not possible to be Eurosceptic and like the idea of remaining in, and being anti-EU and wanting out at whatever cost?
I don't think the EU allows those two positions.
Of course, that's a wonderful political point to end on there. Thank you. Joe, you're now going to close this final debate topic for us.
Well, I believe probably within the EU zone, with the Eurozone, she is queen. Full stop. She is the queen. I may be the king, but you know, that's a different matter. but domestically, what she shows is a slight panic. There's the Energiewende, which is costing billions and billions of pounds. That's after Fukushima. That was a panic move. Also, there's the slight naivety with the NSA spying from the America, because Germany, of course, they don't like because within Germany they have a law that you don't snoop into the private emails, which is, whatever you like, for security reasons, correct. But the underlying thing, she can be rattled, but she is queen of Europe. But who is the king?
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Thank you to all of my guests tonight. Thank you, Bradley, Matthew, Joe, John, and Leon. Thank you all very much indeed for your tweets and for your comments. We're very, very grateful. Very impressed by some of the photoshopping that's gone on tonight, the use of images, and so on. It's been absolutely superb. And we're very, very grateful for your time. Next week, it's #SD12 next week. If you'd like to be on that show, please get in touch. It's really simple and it's quite good fun, even if you do have Matthew trying to shout over you. It is still quite good fun. And don't forget, the week after that, we're having our English special, where we'll be talking in depth about what happens in England now post the Scottish referendum. And we're looking for, and I have some guests already, but we're looking for guests who support no devolutional change whatsoever, people who support English votes for English laws, those who support city-region devolution, regional devolution, and an English parliament. And in fact, of course, if there's anyone there who wants to come on who supports English independence from the rest of the Union, we'd like to hear from you too. We'd like to have you on the show, and we might well have one or two more panelists than usual on that one to cover all those topics. So if you're interested in taking part in that special a week on Sunday, let us know. And again, if you'd like to take part in next week's regular Sunday show, let us know. We're very, very grateful. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. Thank you all very much indeed, and good night.